Hi, my name is Deja Weaver. I am a junior at Mansfield campus and I'm majoring in political science. I will be doing my topic today on the present global issue of human trafficking and how it is relevant to our communities. So what really is human trafficking? The United Nations defines human trafficking as the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of people through force, fraud, or deception with the aim of exploiting these people for profit. The victims of human trafficking often include men, women, and even children of any age and any potential background. There are three main elements to the crime of human trafficking: the act, the means, and the purpose. Traffickers control victims using physical or sexual abuse, blackmail, emotional manipulation, or even the removal of official documents, making it impossible for victims to seek help or escape. So what are the different forms of human trafficking? Human trafficking can include sexual exploitation, entertainment and hospitality industries, and domestic workers or enforced marriages. It can also include trafficking for criminal activity. Victims of these forms are often forced to work in factories, construction sites, or in agricultural production without any pay or adequate salaries, often in fear of violent retaliation or through horrifying conditions. These victims are often tricked or coerced into removing organs, and many are forced into serving as child soldiers or used in crimes. These forms demonstrate the multitude of forms traffickers exploit victims for, and according to the UN, about 6% of victims trafficked globally are trafficked for commission of crime. There is a less common form of trafficking called begging, and it is commonly found in North Africa and the Middle East, and also consists of humiliation tactics. So what has been the global response to human trafficking? The global response to human trafficking has been largely ineffective, but there have been attempts to protect and prevent against human trafficking. The 1989 conference was an adopted resolution by the European Parliament in order to combat human trafficking. There is also the Victims of Trafficking and Violence Protection Act, in which Congress was pressured by a coalition into passing, which would prosecute traffickers in the United States and further the fight against trafficking on a global scale. It also required the Department of State to publish an annual report on the global state of human trafficking. There are also various organizations and their contributions to preventing human trafficking as well as protecting victims and their rights, including Amnesty International and many others. However, the legalization of the sex trade has made it harder to prosecute some traffickers in certain countries, particularly Germany, which legalized the sex trade in 2001. The human trafficking industry makes up billions of dollars for the economies of some of these nations, and there is less drive to push out that industry. The UN's Protocol on Human Trafficking was a huge push in the fight against human trafficking. Countries that would ratify this UN treaty must criminalize human trafficking and develop anti-trafficking laws in line with the protocol's legal provisions, and as well as mandatory protections that must be afforded to victims in which guarantee respect of their rights. The UN aims to train and mentor people to take traffickers down and to provide tools in the forms of research and toolkits in order to effectively respond to human trafficking. The UN makes a promise to help countries in the process of enacting laws and build partnerships with international, domestic, or non-governmental organizations in order to work together on fighting human trafficking. But who do traffickers target? Traffickers often take advantage of people with economic needs, people with intimate partners, mentally ill people, immigrants, people who are physically disabled, or sometimes those with limited education or knowledge of foreign languages. The migration status of individuals can often be used against them by traffickers through fear of exposure. Victims are also far more likely to be trafficked for sexual exploitation, according to the UN Global Report on Trafficking in Persons released in 2022. And what are the different types of traffickers? Large territorial criminal organizations often engage in human trafficking, much like the Mara Salvatrucha group in Central America or the Supreme I confraternity in France. In the United States, groups like the Crips are known to engage in trafficking for exploitation, with the group making hundreds of thousands in profit off their crimes. Intimate partners and relatives often involve manipulation or abuse, and this form often goes much less reported. In South Asia, traffickers use organizations to lend money for tools to parents of children in order to recruit their children into exploitation. Even some companies may contain legitimate documentation that appears official, yet in places like Belgium, there were 4 different companies that were charged with various offenses, including trafficking in persons, and even though they had appeared completely legitimate, they were still engaging in the criminal activities. What are the impacts of human trafficking on the global scale? Victims often experience abuse, occupational hazards, dangerous living conditions, and are subject to physical threats, confinements, and even extended hours of labors under human trafficking. Human trafficking fuels conflict by raising revenue for organized crime groups and armed extremists. Groups like the Islamic State and Boko Haram generate vast amounts of profit from sex trafficking, and even states can sponsor trafficking, which funds military capabilities. Human trafficking displaces many people, and it destabilizes communities on the local level as well as the international scale by threatening fundamental human rights and funding abusive regimes. It uproots local communities, and it hinders progress intended to develop infrastructure, and its function as a multi-billion-dollar industry only furthers these issues. The physical, mental, and other effects that human trafficking can lead to for victims is often devastating. The overall industry of human trafficking is a threat to the stability and security of various regions across the world, with transnational groups acting out organized crime and threatening individual human rights. The overall risk to the development of different communities and the violence that threatens any peace and the damage human trafficking does to the prosperity of communities is an important factor to consider with human trafficking and its impacts. So why does human trafficking matter as a global issue? There is a lack of awareness and resources on the global issue of human trafficking, and more organizations and funding needs to be advocated for so it can be directed towards the use for human trafficking prevention and aid to its victims. The industry will only continue to persist as more organizations continue to profit off its exploitation. So unless more awareness, education, and contribution to resources is spread, the issue of human trafficking will remain on the agenda. So how can we make a difference? Organizations have been established in order to help fight and end human trafficking and protect victims of the crime on an international scale. On the domestic level, there is also National Human Trafficking Resource Center with a hotline that is toll-free and available 24/7. Donations to campaigns can also help support victims as well as help and aid the rescue in those still being exploited through human trafficking. The Blue Campaign is a great public awareness campaign designed to educate the public, law enforcement, and others on the indicators of human trafficking as well as how to appropriately respond. It is important to educate and to spread awareness, and if you suspect anyone to be involved with human trafficking activities, always report. The National Human Trafficking Hotline is available for anyone in the United States in need and is available any day at any time.